Alright guys, today we're going to be checking out a way to use a stud welder to build a sign like this in under an hour. Let's go. Right, so we jump in at the plasma cutter and we are just tearing into it. This sign's pretty simple. The customer had the sign in vector format, which is always the best. So it's laid out, and then I am cutting out these stencils so we can line everything up later on. Use a little bit more metal, but it's worth it to me. And I cut out a second set of the letters because I thought it would make a good little display piece for the shop as well. I'll build that off camera though. The parts get laid out just to, give them a once over, check them out. Then we jump over to the magnetic chuck. This has been basically my favorite tool for quite a while now. It makes grinding small parts so much easier. You don't have to move a clamp around and you can just tear right into them. But be careful, they get hot. Damn it. If y'all haven't yet, I encourage you to join me over on Instagram at 42fabricate. There'll be a link in the description too. You get to see some projects that never even make it to YouTube and, just have some fun with the day-to-day. We're gonna jump over to an acid bath here. I'm using muriatic acid and this acid's pretty tapped out. It's not moving very quick. You can see hardly bubbling at all. Brand new acid would have had all the mill scale off of these in 2 or 3 minutes, but I gave them about 10. We're gonna wash everything off in a bucket with water and a little bit of baking soda in it, just neutralize the acid. You see, I didn't even get all the mill scale off, and I don't need to. I really just want the scale off, so when we put studs on them, we get a good weld. Now again, we're gonna lay them out and just give everything a once over, make sure everything looks good. There weren't any hidden pits in the steel or anything like that, which can happen. Now we're gonna jump over to the star of the show for this build, the stud welder. This guy came from the fine folks over at Studwelding.com. It's the TWI 321, and normally it lives up there on the shelf because that gun and the ground clamp it comes with are long enough to reach over to my table. I think they're like 25 feet. They sent it out to me, no requirements, just asked me to show you guys what you can do with a stud welder in a sign making environment, and I am happy to do so. So there you heard the capacitors inside the machine kind of charging up when I set it to 1/4 inch. And not to down talk the machine, but that's what this is. It's a big box of capacitors that are gonna discharge through the stud. The machine's got a bunch of features that make doing that a lot nicer, but that's the concept behind a stud welder, is you're operating at 150 volts in this case, really, really quick. And you get a good weld because of it. Here I'm actually using some kind of chintzy studs, and you can see that as the copper plating on them blows off. They were just extras I had from forever ago, so we're using them. Now the process here is electricity comes from the machine, through the gun, out into the plate of metal, and then because we have it set up like this, the current is going to travel effectively across the back of the piece of steel. It goes out the pad of the ground clamp and we're good. Because all the contact points are on the back of the sheet of steel, we don't have any sort of marring or pitting or anything like that, which you would have seen in my Black Stallion sign where I didn't ground everything correctly. Check the card out here if you want to watch that. So we keep moving through. This machine's fast. It's taken less than 30 seconds a letter to make these, and I think all in it was like 10 minutes, maybe 12, and I was filming the whole thing. There again, you can see those bad studs, that kind of blown off weld, but they're still secure. You're gonna bend the metal before you break the stud off, and if you do break the stud off, it breaks in the stud, not at the weld. You can see here, just quick, cleaning out the gun a little bit. You can get some schmoo in there sometimes. Now I'm gonna run this one in real time so you guys can see what goes into it. You just slide the stud in, there's a little collet there that kind of grabs onto it. You press it into place to press that spring in there, pull the trigger, and it fires. This little shoe at the bottom, I don't see any reason you couldn't make like a custom one of those. They are removable. So if you needed to get your studs even closer to each other than I did there, I guess you could. You know, just plan it out if you don't want to have to make a new shoe. And then because the studs are all manufactured pretty well, they're all the same length, you have basically a tripod effect where all these letters are super stable. Now we take the stencils we made earlier and flip them over. We're gonna paint on the table just to make another stencil. And then normally we'd place the letters there and put a dot of paint on the top of each stud, then use a piece of plywood to make a stencil for drilling holes in whatever this sign's attaching to. But in this case, Tommy and I realized that we could actually just go take the sheet of steel from the building this is going on and bring it back to the shop and do it that way, which was much faster. So we did that. It's this like Core 10 weathering steel. Stuff's super cool, but man, it's expensive, which is why I don't really use it. Now we're gonna take those stencils, this time right way up, and lay them out on the table, get everything squared up all nice and pretty. There ain't no way we put that down straight. We put that down straight first try. There's no way.
I don't believe that.
Yeah,
it's a different level.
Yeah. You know, I think it's one of those shop superstitions. If it's too easy, something had to have gone wrong. So Tommy and I checked it a bunch of times, but sure as heck, we laid those stencils out perfectly first shot. So I even got up above and looked down at them. Now the letters just kind of drop into place, and we're using those little magnets to do the offset here, and they were basically exactly the right height, which made everything easy. Now I'm just taking a silver Sharpie and I'm putting a dot directly on the top of each stud. We intentionally set these into place about 1/8 of an inch farther down or south or whatever from where we finally want them to go, so that when we make these dots, those become our drill marks to drill out the holes these studs will go through. I hope you followed that, but if not, just watch it happen. Just to get a nice clean hole, we're gonna open each hole up with a 1/8 of an inch drill bit and then step that up to a 5/16. That extra 16th in there over a quarter gives us just a little bit of wiggle room, make sure everything looks just right. To attach the studs, we'd have a couple different options. You know, you could put a nut, you thread a nut down onto the stud, slide it through the sheet, and then thread another nut on the back. That works great, it makes it removable, but I don't want to see those nuts, and man, that sounded bad. Nobody wants to see those fasteners, and you know, I don't like it at all. We could have rusted them out, I guess, in this case, and they would have looked all right, but I don't want to do that. So we're just going to thread a nut on the back, and then eventually we will flip the piece over and attach everything that way. God, they had to get powder coat on the ends of all the threads, didn't they? That's why everybody needs a Tommy.
Fit anyway.
It fits under everything. So with all the fasteners just started onto the threads, we're gonna flip the sign over and then tighten each one down to where it's exactly flush with the top of the stud. And we'll, you know, clean them up, make sure everything looks right, kind of got underneath it and looked up, laid down on the floor, everything looked good. So we're gonna tap all of the studs with the nuts on them down level, fire up the new HTP Pro Pulse 220 MTS, and just put a tack on each stud. And then of course, there's always the one you miss. So those tacks are gonna do plenty. They're strong enough, and if we ever did have to remove them, it would just be a quick zip with a grinder. Now the little burn marks from welding will rust over because this is, again, Core 10, and we haven't lost the properties of the Core 10 because of those burn marks. Now the install was super easy. We literally went and picked this sheet of steel up and had it back on the building within an hour, less than that. Put all the screws in, and this one's good to go. We had the whole project done. It was about 2 hours of time, including the install. There's not much to it. Alright guys, if you like the build, I encourage you to hit subscribe. If you want to find out some more information about how this project was bid so you're not leaving money on the table, check out Patreon. And of course, 2 videos that YouTube thinks you might like. Thanks.